Hey YouTube, it's your boy Widgie here. I've got a little treat for you today, just because I'm feeling festive and it's Christmas time, of course, less than a week's time, and I thought I'd give you an updated version of my tier list for the easiest and hardest civs to play. So we've got all new civs, we've got the African DLC, we've got Mexico, and much, much more. So let's get into it. Right guys, you find me on the tier making list, and before I start this is going to be really good for players who are new to the game, they've just bought it, or players that kind of want to actually get into a new civilization and experience it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try and start with the easiest, and I'm going to work my way down to the hardest. So let's have a look at the easiest. So I think a lot of people would put French in easy, a breeze. I'm going to put French in easy. And I'm going to put Ottoman in easy for now. So reasoning around French is because they're really solid civ, they're strong, their villagers are really buffed villagers compared to other civilizations. Their gather rate's a lot higher, their attack damage is, their HP is. So you're not as susceptible to raids. You can sort of defend against raids a lot easier, and also rushes as well. France are really good for that. And also they've just got a really good strong economy. They've got great cards for their cavalry and stuff like that. So I think French, a breeze is sort of one I put there. I would say trying to develop French, if you're playing as the French, trying to get better as France is difficult because there's so many avenues you can go with openings and build orders and strategies. They're very versatile, and I wouldn't say that they are a breeze in that sort of sense. I would say if you're just getting used to the civ and you want to try them out as a beginner, I would say they're quite easy to understand the basics. Ottoman I would put as a breeze as well, and the reason is because you don't have to worry about creating villages all the time. I've had a few sort of disagreements with other people on Reddit and on Twitch and YouTube and that, saying that they don't believe that Ottomans are one of the easiest because of the whole mechanic around the villages. But just think of it, at the end of the day, yes, you do have that mosque building, which is one that you need to understand, but I think really the fact that you don't have to think about creating villages, you don't have to macro your food for villagers, it lets you off. You know, you can make that mistake, you don't have to think about it, and it's got you covered, and you're always creating villages. The only thing you need to bear in mind is to do the upgrade at the mosque to increase the population cap for your settlers. That's the only thing you need to worry about. But I think they belong in breeze. I think they belong in breeze. Now it's easy to get sort of mixed up in what's the strongest civ and what's the easiest civ. They're two different things, and easiest is looking at obviously how easy it is to pick them up if you're very new to the civ and you've got no idea how they work, not how strong they are. So I'm tempted to put Dutch in a breeze, but I'm probably going to put Dutch around the okay mark. But let me just see if there's any more that I can do. Now I think that we're gonna stick with that, and we're gonna put Spain in easy because that's a nice straightforward civ. You get shipments a lot quicker because you get XP in, so you've always got cards coming in, and they sort of play as just a very sort of straightforward civilization, just as an RTS, a standard RTS would play. There's nothing kind of unusual with them, and yeah, I would say they're a good, nice, easy civ. I would probably go ahead and say Brits are easy as well. Now, the reason I haven't put them in breeze is because a lot of the time Brits revolve around building manor houses to get extra villagers, and that obviously requires a lot more micromanagement of your settlers if you're going to do a boom. Also, if you're macroing as well, once again, same sort of thing. You've got to try and think about what you're doing and how you're playing. But they are a very strong civilization. They've got a great unit roster, and they've just got an insane sort of boom that you can easily pull off at a beginner level. So yeah, I'll definitely put them in easy. Let's have a look, see if there's any more. I would probably put Dutch on easy. Now obviously Dutch revolve a lot around coin, where your vills cost coin instead of food, so I'm tempted to put them in okay, but I'm going to put them in easy for now because you just have to focus around building banks. That'll get you extra coin, and then you can start getting villagers. But I think that's one of the reasons why I put them in easy and not put them in a breeze, is because of their simple change there in how they work. What else? Is there any others that we can put in easy? I don't think so for now. I think I'm gonna hold. I'm going to hold fire, and we're going to move into okay. Now, there's obviously going to be a lot that goes into okay here. So let's have a look at it. So I think that okay is Germany, and I think that okay is, I think okay is ports. I think Swedes are okay. I think Japanese are okay, and think Inca's okay. And is there any more? I don't know. Maybe Mexico's okay, potentially. I'm thinking maybe but to Mexico into tricky. Yeah, I think, yeah, let's put Mexico into okay. So we've got quite a lot here. So let's run through them from left to right. This is what I put so far. This could be subject to change at the end of the video. I might make a few adjustments, but let's have a go. So okay, we've got Germany. Now, Germany rely on a lot of shipments because they get Uhlans, which is their cavalry. They get that after every shipment. And they've got settler wagons, which are basically sort of buffed villagers that can, you know, build stuff a lot faster, gather resources a lot faster. Similar to the Courrier de Bois unit, which is the French villager. Very strong civilization, but they are a little bit difficult to get used to. And I sort of experienced this when I was playing them. So this is my personal opinion. I found them a little bit tricky to understand how to start ramping up and start getting a bit, you know, getting a good eco going, getting a good amount of units. And I think it takes a little bit of time to understand how to open with Germany, because there's a few things you've got to bear in mind. Portuguese. Now, one of the main things of that is that you get a TC every time you age up. So that's quite nice. You don't have to worry about building another TC, and you can start to build quite a strong economy from them. The only reason I put them in okay is simply because of the fact that they are quite a weak civ at the moment. And I know that I said that we shouldn't be looking at strongest and weakest civs, but that does have a little bit of part to play in how you learn them. Because yes, you get a TC and everything like that, which is great. There's a few things that I think you need to sort of get to grips with, because you can easily get rushed and stuff like that. And you need to know how to sort of defend effectively to be good at playing ports, in my personal opinion. And they're not one of the strongest civs at the moment. So I put them in okay. A lot of these ones here, all these four are auto gatherers. So they have buildings that automatically gather. Obviously, we've mentioned Dutch. I completely forgot about Dutch. But these four here are auto gatherers. So there's buildings, there's certain things that will automatically gather your resources. And that's one of the reasons why I put these in okay. Now, you're probably thinking, Widgie, why didn't you put them in easy? Now, the reason I didn't put them in easy is because a lot of these rely heavily on building your auto-gathering buildings. Now, relying heavily on something means you've really got to try and focus to get the resources available to be able to build these buildings, and there can be a lot of pressure around it, and you can be susceptible to getting rushed, to getting punished for it, and there's a certain way that you need to go about doing it, and that can take some time to understand. So I wouldn't necessarily put them in easy. However, actually no, I think I will make an adjustment. I think I will make an adjustment at the end of the video on a couple of these, but we're going to leave all four of these in okay. The Japanese, they sort of build shrines very early on. That's kind of the thing that you do, and you kind of want to build them around hunts and stuff like that. Once again, there's certain sort of strategies around positioning shrines, when to build them, how many to build them at a certain time, what shipments to get, and you can also switch on your shrines what resources you also get, and that can be a bit tricky of when to sort of know to switch on your shrines and when not to. So that's kind of a bit more tricky. You've also got the different age up system as well. You age up through wonders because they're an Asia civ. That's something different compared to the Euro civs. That's something that you might need to get to grips with as well. Inca are a native civ. They age up like the Euro civs, but Inca has cancha houses, which are similar to shrines, but they produce food. And once again, same sort of thing with macroing, really, just trying to really understand how they work. And there's been recent patches to Inca as well. And there's many crazy things you can do with Inca, like garrisoning in certain buildings. You know, you've got a few big buttons. Natives have these big buttons on certain buildings and units. It can be quite a learning curve compared to Euro civs. So, and their unit roster is very unique. So that's something that you might have to get your head around as well. So we're going to leave those in okay. And finally, Mexico, one of the latest civilizations, or the latest, sorry, to hit. And I would say the reason they're okay is because they are extremely diverse. There's many options you can do with them. Their unit roster is very complex. They have haciendas, which are buildings that auto-gather. They auto-gather food, but you can switch them. They're sort of like an estate. They're a mill. They're a livestock pen, all rolled into one. Yeah, it can be extremely daunting. So even though they've got a few buildings that help with eco and it's nice, I would still stick them in okay. personally. So moving on to tricky, then we're going to be touching upon tad daunting. So tricky, I would honestly say the states are tricky. I would say that Russia's tricky. I would say Lakota's tricky. I would say probably the African civs are tricky. And yeah, let's just leave it there for now and see if we need to add any more. So let's go through left to right here. So the reason that I've put states in as tricky is they are quite a straightforward civ in how they age up and all that sort of stuff. Just from me personally, when playing them, I felt like their cards are quite complex to understand and when to use them. You also have, similar to Mexico actually, when you age up, you have the revolution system, which you have in Mexico, just like you have with the States. But also you have to bear in mind with the States, there's just certain cards that you need to use at a certain time and you shouldn't use at a certain time, and it can get kind of difficult to understand. And also their unit roster is slightly different as well to the standard Euro civ, but we're going to leave it in tricky. I think that's a fair place to put them. Russia's an interesting one. A lot of people are thinking, hang on a minute, they're a straightforward Euro civ, why have you put them in tricky? And the reason is because a lot of their units and also settlers are trained in batches. So you can't, of course, you can train up to 5 military units, for example. Normally, you can train 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and then they will come out at the same time. But with Russia, you have to train them in the full batch. Not for all military units, but for the majority of them, you have to train them in the full batch, which means that you've got to pre-plan your economy. You've got to pre-plan your resources. And this is actually super tricky to get a hold of because you'll be very surprised how much food they require. And if you can't perfectly match up the resources that you need at the perfect time, you'll really start to fall behind and they will be really tricky to sort of understand. Also, as I say, there's certain ways of playing Russia. They're more of a quantity rather than quality based with their military units. So I think tricky is a fair one to put them in. But as I say, let me know down in the comments below what you think. If you think what I'm saying is correct, let me know. Moving on to the Sioux or the Lakota. Now, the reason I put them in tricky, a lot of people are thinking, well, you don't have to build houses, so they're quite straightforward. But because they're a native civ, I think a lot of native civs personally are difficult to understand. And the reason that is because their unit roster is completely different to Euro civilizations, which the majority of civilizations are Euro-based. And the natives, especially with Lakota as well, quite difficult to understand. You have to build the tribal marketplace to mine gold, for example. That's something that you're not too sure about. However, you don't have to build houses, which is great. But Lakota do rely a lot upon their cavalry, which is unusual. Not a lot of civs do that. So that's something that's quite unusual and might throw you off. So I think putting them down as tricky is fair. Also, sometimes when you actually fight, you have to also simultaneously build TPs, which boost your land units or boost any military unit, in battle. And that can be quite manic when you're in a fight or when you're about to go into a fight or anything like that. So there's quite a steep learning curve, I think, with Lakota personally, so I'm going to leave them in tricky. And finally, we got the 2 African civs here. Now, the reason that I put them in tricky is simply because of the tribal marketplace, not the tribal marketplace, the livestock, I think it's the livestock marketplace, where you can sell cattle. So you start off with cattle when you start as a civilization. You can get cards that can get you extra cattle. When you put them on the livestock marketplace, they will slowly start to fatten the cattle, and also they will start to gain in value, and you can sell them for gold or wood. However, it works in like a basic economic structure of like supply and demand. So if you were to sell the cattle for gold, your next sell price for gold would drop significantly, and you'd have to wait until you could get that same price again. So there's that sort of a lot of pre-planning involved that can make it quite complex to sort of know when you need to do things. I would say also Hausa is very different to Ethiopia. They both have that marketplace that I've just mentioned, but Hausa relies more on influence that you can get through universities, and universities obviously have like an area of effect, and they can produce more XP through TPs, through TCs, depending on what range the university is at. And that's a kind of very unique building. It can take a while to understand. Ethiopia relies on I think they're called monasteries. I can't remember what they're called. I think they're called monasteries that sit on gold. So you build the building on gold, and then you get abans, and the abans will then go to the gold and then mine the gold for you. So very tricky to understand and knowing when to build them. So I would definitely put both of these on tricky. So we're going to move down to a tad daunting. And I think India is definitely one of the first that needs to be sat on a tad daunting. And the reason is simply because villagers cost wood, which is very strange. That's first of all very strange. And it completely throws your macro. All the other civs, villagers do not cost wood. You know, they either cost gold or they cost food. If you're Dutch, for example, they cost gold. Anywhere else, it's food. But with India, it's wood, which is very, very interesting. And this is a steep, steep learning curve, trying to know when to macro, how to macro. And it took me a hell of a long time to understand the civilization. And I still don't really understand them fully. They're an extremely sort of powerful civ once you do understand them, but it takes a long time to get to grips with them and knowing how to sort of balance your macro and stuff like that. So definitely belongs in a tad daunting. Now we are left with these three. Now these three, I'm not too sure where to put these, and I don't know whether or not they all belong in a tad daunting. I would honestly put down Aztec down as a tad daunting because you rely on the community center, which is their sort of place where you can change the sort of ceremonies and stuff like that to boost certain things within the game. And that is reliant upon having more warrior priests, and that is very complex, and you will build a community center straight at like from the start with Aztec. So you're relying 100% on the community plaza, and that can be very difficult to try and understand. Also, their unit roster, once again, very unique, and you need to get to grips with how they work. So I would put Aztec in a tad daunting. These two, I think actually I'm going to put both of these in tricky. I'm going to put both of them in tricky. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to put both of them in tricky. China is obviously a Asian civilization, and they're very similar to Japan and India, where you build wonders to age up, which is a very unusual thing, something to get to grips with. They have villages as well that cost more wood, but they supply more population, and you can garrison units in them. And also they train banner armies, which is something sort of to get your head around as well, because that's very, very unusual. I'm going to put them in daunting because of the banner armies. I think tops it. The Howd or the Haudenosaunee. Now I'm going to stick them in here, very similar to like Lakota in the way they work with the tribal marketplace, but they will rely more on either rushing or semi-FFing or something like that, some sort of opening. But I think it's fair to stick them in tricky as well. So I think that's it. I don't want to make any more adjustments. I think I'm happy with what I've done. I would really love to see what I actually did in the previous video. So let's have a quick look and see what I did a while ago, nearly a year ago now. Let's see what I did in my previous tier list, and let's just do a quick compare and see what the difference is. All right, here we go. So this is the little snapshot from my old video. I think that's nearly a year old now. You can see on the bottom right here how I categorized everything compared to how I've got it now. So actually a lot of it hasn't really changed that much. You know, we've got China and India in a tad daunting, but I've gone ahead and put Aztec in tad daunting as well now. That's slightly different there. You can see that the Ottoman now I've bumped up to a breeze, and I've got the French and I've got the Brits down as easy now, and the Dutch has moved up a little bit. So overall, not too bad. I think about 80% there really in sort of how my perception has changed over time. But of course, guys, let me know what you think, especially in the comments below. I'd love to know. And of course, if you found this really useful and you're going to go ahead and start playing, I don't know, the French, Ottoman, make sure to let me know and let me know how you get on. Of course, you can catch me in the next video or the next stream. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next.